Hello everyone, and welcome to Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting series on what if Naruto had the power of green-eyed monster. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Naruto shook his plastic cup, swirling the contents around in a fizzy mess. Music pumped from one of the various boomboxes scattered throughout the house, adding a pulsating beat to the chaos of the party Kiba was throwing. Leaning his lithe frame against the wall, he lazily glanced up from his beer, surveying the scene before him. Sakura was laughing at something Ino had said, both of their eyes trained on Sasuke, who was staring out the star-filled window. Kiba was leaning up against the counter, chatting up a giggling girl, when he spilled beer all over her dress. She then proceeded to slap him. Naruto bit his lip to keep from laughing. He pushed himself off the wall trying, and failing, to shake away the drunken haze that clouded his mind. Smirking and swaggering his way to the dance floor, he let the beat fill him up and move him, carrying him away into a world where nothing but the erratic pulse of the song existed. Starting when a hard, hot body rubbed up against his, Naruto was yanked back into reality, where a nice-looking boy rubbed up against him, grinding his groin into Naruto's thigh in time with the music. Smiling slyly at the newcomer, Naruto ran his hands up the boy's chest, the beer and music making it hard for him to think straight. He heard a hoot from somewhere close to him and swiveled his head, looking for the maker of the noise. Kiba was staring at him, his face split up in a devilish grin as he gave Naruto a thumbs up and made a crude gesture with his hands. Rolling his eyes and flipping Kiba the bird, he allowed himself to once again be pulled into the lull of the boy's hand on his body, feather-light touches teasing his senses and making him feel hot and cold all at once. As the beat of the music picked up, so did the intensity of the boy's eyes, his gyrations becoming fevered, pushing Naruto close to the edge of desire. Biting his lip and pushing his hands through the boy's silken locks of gold, Naruto met the boy's hip thrusts with his own, a small moan escaping his mouth as the dancing transformed into foreplay. The world around him seemed to disappear as the stranger slowly slid his arms up around Naruto's neck, his fingers tickling fine hair, sending goosebumps lighting along Naruto's body like pinpricks of fire. As the blonde gazed into Naruto's eyes, a burning pit of lust arose within him, driving him into a frenzy. He threw his head back and dragged the stranger closer, his palms flattening against a toned back. Cool lips were the only antidote to the fire that was coursing through his veins, sending him into a series of shivers every time he felt those lips graze his scorching skin. Naruto brought his face back down and licked his lips, watching his partner release a small moan when Naruto pinched the muscle just above his buttocks. His last thread of self-control snapped in two as he viewed this, and his lips suddenly came crashing down on the boy's, their mouths colliding in an erotic dance of dominance. Before the winner could be determined, however, Naruto was roughly ripped away from the stranger's warm embrace. Blinking the lust-filled daze from his eyes, Naruto's gaze zeroed in on the face in front of him. Sasuke, his face flushed and eyes blazing with fury, shook Naruto by his shoulders roughly. "What do you think you're doing, Dobi?" Sasuke ground out, his jaw popping. "What do I think I'm doing? Are you crazy?" Naruto shouted in Sasuke's face, his whiskered cheeks blazing from both his encounter with the stranger and his building anger. Sasuke ran his tongue over his lip slowly, freezing Naruto in place with an ice-cold glare. He was saved when Sasuke directed the penetrating look to the boy, whose hair was pulled up into crazy spikes from Naruto's relentless fingers. "And you? How dare you touch Naruto like that?" Sasuke snarled, his fists curled up, his knuckles white. Anger boiled up inside of Naruto and he pushed Sasuke, sending his dorm mate stumbling. "Last time I checked, bastard, you don't own me. I can dance with whoever I want." Sasuke's piercing gaze locked Naruto in place. "Well, maybe some people don't enjoy watching you two shove your tongues down each other's throats." Naruto narrowed his azure eyes at Sasuke. He was suddenly painfully aware of the silence around him. There was no talking, and someone, probably Sakura, had turned off the boomboxes. Kiba coughed uncomfortably, and Naruto turned his head towards his friend, eyes pleading for forgiveness. Kiba waved it off and grinned at him. "Hey, who turned off them tunes?" Kiba shouted while pumping his fist, sloshing most of his drink onto the hard-tiled counter. Naruto gave him a relieved wave and turned around, the music blaring suddenly again, rising with the cheers of the party-goers. Sasuke was still staring at him, and when their gazes clashed, cerulean meeting inky eyes, the look in the raven's eyes made the breath in Naruto's throat seize up and stay lodged within him, as if afraid of leaving the safety of Naruto's body. Naruto's dance partner had pulled a magnificent disappearing act, leaving the fox alone with his fuming raven. Eyeing Sasuke, Naruto pushed out a frustrated sigh and jabbed his finger towards the door. I don't even feel like being here anymore, Teme, so just take me home. Why do I have to take your sorry ass home? Not like I owe you anything. The Uchiha spat out. Well, you were my ride here, so I don't really have that many options, Naruto replied, wanting to punch the stubborn idiot into the ground. Fine. Naruto had never realized how scary that one word could sound, but Sasuke made a fine job of it. With only a single syllable, the Uchiha had sent shivers traveling like electric spiders' legs down Naruto's spine. Sasuke took off through the tight throng of pulsing bodies, sending Naruto into a wild man hunt to find his one ticket home. Eyes latching onto an impatient raven waiting by the open door, Naruto frantically squeezed and wiggled his way through people, receiving quite a few glares. Finally free, Naruto followed Sasuke out into the cold autumn night. The brisk air hit him like a slap in the face, seeping into his pores and calming the fires of rage. Sliding into Sasuke's black Ford, Naruto let his head fall back onto the cushioned headrest. The telltale rumble of the engine announced that the truck starting up, and soon Naruto felt the movement of the car swaying gently underneath him. Closing his eyes briefly, Naruto succumbed to the needy fingers of exhaustion. A sharp jab awoke Naruto and he jackknifed up, banging his head on the roof of the car. Squinting in pain and rubbing his forehead, Naruto blinked to clear the sleepiness from his eyes. There was a complete silence, one that made the air seem touchable and thick. Glancing over at Sasuke, Naruto glared. Why do you fucking hit me? He asked, angrily unbuckling his seatbelt and clambering noisily out of the vehicle. The raven followed suit, completely unfazed, all signs of the crazed fury he had possessed not 20 minutes ago vanished into thin air. Well, I had to wake you up somehow, he replied dully, meandering slowly behind Naruto as they walked into their dorm building. So you hit me, huh? Nice. Naruto threw the words out into the air, his anger pungent. As he jerkily unlocked the door to their shared room, Sasuke couldn't help but admire the view of the blonde's ass. Shaking the thought quickly from his mind, he strolled leisurely into the room, watching as Naruto flung his jacket off and crawled into his twin-sized bed, his brawny shoulders rigid. Closing and locking the door quietly, Sasuke turned all the lights off, save for one lamp as he got ready for bed. He pulled his sticky clothes off his body, sighing as the cool air hit his overheated skin. After throwing his shed clothes into a pile on the flow bathroom to brush his teeth, closing the door behind him, Naruto lay rigid on his bed, listening to the quiet sounds of Sasuke preparing for bed. For some reason the soft sounds angered him further, and he was a sizzling hotbed of coals by the time he heard Sasuke walk into the bathroom and close the door. He couldn't believe the nerve of that bastard, signaling him out for dancing at a party. A pleasant heat creeped up his neck as he remembered the golden-haired stranger's hands roaming his body. Okay, maybe he was doing a little more than dancing, but that didn't mean the Teme had to call him out on it. The sound of the bathroom door opening and closing halted his thoughts, and silence filled the dorm dominatingly. A soft rustle penetrated the white noise starting to fill the blonde's ears, and then a timid whisper cut across the room. Naruto? Are you still mad at me? Sasuke. A hard stone of indignance settled in Naruto's stomach, and he remained silent, keeping his back firmly facing the raven. There was a pregnant pause, and before Naruto knew what was happening, he felt his bed dip, and a warm body sidled up next to his. He stiffened further, his mouth open to yell at the Uchiha, but the sound died in his throat when he felt Sasuke slide his hands lightly up Naruto's back. Shivers racked his body when he felt slender fingers curl into his hair, warm breath caressing his exposed neck. Sasuke, the word was a hoarse whisper, forced violently from Naruto's mouth. Shish. I know you like this. The husky words filled the air, sliding over Naruto's cheeks, filling his body with a humming warmth. What was the raven doing? Sasuke's hands traced a pattern into the back of Naruto's neck again, and a wash of warmth was sent straight down to his crotch. He made a soft humming noise in Naruto's ear. nipping at the shell of it before tracing his lips down to the base of Naruto's throat. He placed long, lingering kisses on the scorching skin, igniting it further and pulling a strangled mule from within the blonde. Suddenly, a cool, sinewy hand slid up the back of Naruto's back, making a feather-light trail over his skin. Biting back a moan, Naruto tried desperately to get a hold of the reality that had slipped away from him. This was Sasuke. He should be mad at him, not letting him molest him like he was some sort of exclusive bedroom toy. He opened his mouth to word these feelings when the raven's hand crept into his pants, palming his ass. A low, brutal moan escaped Naruto's mouth, and without his brain's consent, he arched into the Uchiha's hand. He could practically feel Sasuke's smirk. Naruto closed his eyes and bit his lip, digging up all of his willpower, and violently pulled himself away from Sasuke. Panting hard, he ran his hands through his hair and stared hard at the crumpled bedsheet, trying to gather his thoughts and calm his eager manhood. I can't do this, Sasuke. I'm mad at you," Naruto replied, and he had to clear his throat of lust before moving on. He sounded as if he were trying to convince himself. "I mean seriously, what did you have against that guy?" he finally asked, looking up. Sasuke was staring hard at him, his deep onyx eyes piercing right into Naruto. Then he slowly crawled forward, placing both his hands on either side of Naruto's thighs, his breath washing over the blonde in waves of needy warmth. "What I have against that guy is that he was touching you. No one can touch you. No one but me," Sasuke growled, and before Naruto could respond, the raven's mouth was on his. A moan of pure ecstasy erupted from Sasuke, vibrating into Naruto's mouth. The other boy's lips were surprisingly soft against the blonde's, but the fact was soon forgotten when Naruto felt a hot, pulsing muscle force its way into his mouth, exploring every centimeter of his hot cavern. His self-restraint was blown to smithereens when the raven's intrusion of his mouth took place, and Naruto returned the kiss with a renewed force. He would think about all that other stuff later. Right now, Sasuke was making it hard to even remember to breathe. Naruto timidly met the raven's tongue, the smooth heat driving him into frenzy. He clawed at Sasuke's back, digging his nails into the bare, porcelain skin. A surprised grunt came from within Sasuke's mouth, and he in turn carted his hands through the blonde's hair, gently taking his teeth to the fox's plump lower lip. Shivers rippled into Naruto's being and he opened his mouth to moan, but Sasuke's mouth caught the sound, his tongue diving into the tan boy's mouth. Their tongues met more abruptly this time, and a dance for dominance erupted brutally inside of them. Naruto won, pushing the raven onto the bedsheets, and breaking their contact to straddle the proud Uchiha. Swallowing, Naruto pressed his hands firmly into Sasuke's lithe chest. He smiled coyly down at his raven, whose eyes were slightly curious, watching his movements. Naruto bent down low and slowly brought his tongue onto Sasuke's earlobe. In response, he felt the dark-haired boy shudder, his body slightly arching off the bed. Smiling, Naruto took Sasuke's earlobe in between his lips, sucking softly before trailing a tongue over the shell of his ear. A strangled groan erupted from Sasuke's mouth and Naruto felt his hands press into his thighs, squeezing and massaging. Biting Sasuke's ear one last time, Naruto brought his lips to the Uchiha's neck, enjoying the frenzy he was sending the raven into. Bringing his lips roughly down on the boy's neck, Naruto sucked with a fury, suddenly wanting to leave lasting marks on him. As Sasuke bucked beneath him, Naruto continued to viciously suck on the wonderfully exposed neck, trailing his tongue softly over each of the angry red love spots he left on his raven. "Oh, God, Naruto, you've left enough fucking hickeys," Sasuke ground out, his hands clawing at the soft cotton of the blonde's shirt. Grinning and pulling back, Naruto licked his lips, trailing his hands up the Uchiha's exposed chest. As he watched, Sasuke's eyes took on a twinkling glimmer of mischief, and Naruto frantically tried to steady himself on Sasuke but was just a bit too slow. Sasuke was up in flash, flipping the blonde over onto his back, pinning him, positions traded. "I have a question, Naruto," Sasuke said lowly, grinning slyly down at him. Swallowing in anxious pleasure, Naruto opened his mouth to respond when a sudden, blinding white-hot flash of pleasure ricocheted through his body. A loud, long moan burst from the blonde, his hips bucking frantically to increase the dizzying friction. Sasuke smirked down at him, his hand placed casually over Naruto's groin, lightly squeezing it at random intervals, causing the same blinding flashes of ecstasy to shoot through Naruto's body, sending him spiraling into a drunken haze where only pleasure existed. He was a mewling mess by the time Sasuke took his hand away, and his pants formed a tight tent around his now red-hot erection. His fingers worked their way into the bedsheets, twisting them in circles with his fingers as Sasuke dragged his hand up Naruto's shirt. Removing the shirt and replacing the fabric with lustfully woven kisses, Sasuke cloaked Naruto's skin in fiery caresses. "Ah, Jesus, Sasuke," Naruto ground out, biting his lip. "Don't you want to know what my question for you is?" Sasuke asked, leaning forward so his full weight rested on Naruto, his face a hair's breadth away. The teasing in his voice made Naruto's manhood twitch and he released a shaky breath. "Why yes." He breathed, eyelids fluttering as Sasuke went back to tracing tantalizing circles around his pert nubs. "Well, I'm going to ask you one more time," the raven purred, smirking as he brought his face down to Naruto's chest. Warm breath traveled over sensitive skin and Naruto whimpered, his body writhing with need. He was trembling with need and his pants weren't even off yet. Letting go of another yelp, Naruto heard a deep rumble from Sasuke's chest. Then he bit down. Naruto's eyes rolled back in his head when Sasuke's deep timbre of ours. Too wrapped up in his own pleasure, he couldn't focus on composing an answer for the Uchiha. A sharp thrust from Sasuke's hips sent Naruto over the edge completely. "I said, who do you belong to?" the raven roared. As he came down slowly, Naruto let go of a shaky breath, his fingers quavering from the afterglow of his climax. The next thing he was aware of was that he was weight-free. Sasuke sat not too far off, a victorious smirk etched into his fine features. "Holy shit, Sasuke, you're..." Naruto's face flushed as he sat up, running his hands through his hair. Gentle fingers were then wrapped around Naruto's length, and he gasped in surprise, biting his lip as he fell back down onto the bed. "I don't know if I can take much mo, oh fuck." Naruto felt his pulse quicken when Sasuke pumped him with one steady pull of his hand. Pleasure crawled along thorn-tipped fingers up Naruto's body, and his breath caught in his throat. "What was that? It sounded like you wanted to stop." Sasuke breathed, leaning down to kiss the sensitive skin of Naruto's inner thigh. "No, please don't stop," Naruto begged, running his tongue across his bottom lip and letting loose a moan when Sasuke continued his pumping, but harder and faster, his grip tightening. Bucking his hips to match Sasuke's pace, Naruto was becoming putty in the raven's hands once again. The pressure was suddenly gone, releasing Naruto from the overpowering spell he'd been under. Letting out a gush of air, he tried to adjust to the sudden absence of intense pleasure. The bed lifted as Sasuke got off the mattress, standing above Naruto, a look of out-of-control desire burning in his deep black eyes. "I want you to touch me, Naruto." Sasuke purred, running his hands through his hair and casting Naruto a look that had him hooked instantly. Scrambling off the bed, Naruto fell to his knees on the floor, desire taking control of his brain. Looking up at Sasuke once, Naruto bent close to Sasuke's happy trail, and followed its path with his tongue. He was rewarded with a sharp inhale from above. Gripping the waistband of Sasuke's boxers with his teeth, Naruto tugged the clothing down, his nose brushing across Sasuke's rock-hard erection. A wanton moan filled the air as Naruto slid his tongue along Sasuke's rolling veins, his hands roaming down to fondle the raven's balls, massaging them teasingly with his fingers as he bobbed up and down Sasuke's length. Loosening his throat, he pulled more of Sasuke in, feeling his head at the base of his throat. Swallowing, he made his throat constrict around Sasuke, and with that, a mangled grunt filled the air. Suddenly, the blonde was being pushed onto the bed, his elbows and knees supporting his weight. Sasuke leaned down close to his ear and bit his lobe, trailing his tongue along the sensitive skin behind Naruto's ear, making him shudder. He felt something warm rub his entrance, and gasped aloud when he was suddenly, brutally invaded. "Oh, you like this, don't you? You like my finger in your ass, don't you, Naruto?" Sasuke asked, slowly moving in and out of Naruto's entrance, pushing a groan from his lips. Sasuke added another finger, scissoring his digits to loosen Naruto up for when he really penetrated him. Naruto moaned wantonly, pushing his ass up against Sasuke's fingers, biting his lip to hold in another moan. Suddenly Sasuke's fingers brushed up against something inside of the blonde, making Naruto arch his back and cry out in ecstasy, his head thrown back, mouth slack. The pressure was then removed, and Naruto whimpered at the loss. The sound soon died in his throat when he felt the head of Sasuke's manhood ready at his puckered hole, and transformed into a cry of pain when Sasuke thrust once into Naruto. The pain brought tears to the corners of his eyes, and breath hissed out from between his cage of teeth. Sasuke pulled back once more and paused, allowing Naruto time to adjust before he threw himself forward once more, his slick organs somehow finding the same bundle of nerves that had nearly sent Naruto spiraling into another orgasm. Flames of pleasure erupted like fireworks around Naruto's body and he threw his head back with a cry, pulling his lower lip into his mouth in satisfaction. Sasuke pounded into the blonde a few more times before he cried out a series of profanities, spanking Naruto once more before releasing himself inside the tanboy. His body curled around Naruto as he bucked. Finally they both fell into a sweaty, tangled heap on the soiled mattress. Breathing hard, Sasuke pulled himself gingerly from Naruto's warmth, rubbing his hands over the exhausted blonde's arms. Naruto tried to open his eyes but failed, leaning into the comforting warmth that was Sasuke. Before the greedy fingers of sleep could ensnare him, Naruto said, "I'm so talking to you about this tomorrow." A soft tickle brushed along the back of Naruto's neck, pulling him up to the surface of consciousness. His eyes fluttered behind closed eyelids, but the same wash of warm air rubbed up against his body and his eyes snapped open. He was confined in a prison on arm. Two pale, sinewy forearms clutched his waist, pulling his back flush against a chest. A very warm, very real chest. That when Naruto realized he had on no clothes. As his eyes grew, so did his memory, and flashes, like the flip of a pad of paper, dashed through his mind, one after another. He was lying on the bed, panting with ecstasy. He was on top of Sasuke, taking pleasure in teasing him. Him being relentlessly pounded by a certain raven. Sasuke. Just thinking the name made shivers travel up his spine, and crawl up to the crown of his head. Had he really taken part in all that last night? Closing his eyes, Naruto breathed once, twice, 3 times before running his tongue over his lip and flipping around. Sasuke was sleeping. His eyes were closed, his long lashes fluttering against high cheekbones, porcelain skin framed by pitch black and unruly hair. Naruto sucked his lower lip into his mouth at the sight. He had never before realized how beautiful Sasuke was. Slowly but surely, the blonde lifted his shaking fingers to touch the other boy's pale skin, tracing patterns on it, committing the feel of the smooth satin skin beneath his fingers to memory. Suddenly, Onyx's eyes snapped open, freezing Naruto in place. They were soft with sleep, lacking their usual intensity. As Sasuke processed what Naruto was doing, a gentle, genuine smile shaped his lovely mouth. "Morning, sunshine." Sasuke whispered thickly, grasping Naruto's hand with his own and holding it tightly. Naruto's eyes couldn't stray from the raven's features, completely entranced by the way his breath washed gently over his face. Morning," the blonde stuttered out, blinking a couple times to clear his head. Somehow the memories of last night became 10 times more real now that Sasuke was awake next to Naruto. Swallowing, he backed to the edge of the bed, never breaking eye contact. "So, about last night," Naruto finally spit out, reaching behind him in search of his phone. Sasuke's eyes became glazed and Naruto knew he was remembering all the things they had done to each other. "What about it?" Sasuke asked, returning to the present. He scooted closer to Naruto on the bed, and the closer he got, the farther Naruto went. Finally he tumbled off the bed, landing roughly on his side. Popping up quickly, he smiled hurriedly at Sasuke, who was frowning at him, his dark hair perfectly ruffled, the bed sheets pulled up around his waist. "Naruto?" the Uchiha inquired, quirking his head to the right. Laughing a little too loudly, Naruto snagged his pants and hopped on one foot as he slipped into them, staring down at the floor the whole time as he fought the tsunami of awkward that threatened to tear him to shreds. "Well, it was totally unexpected, and we were both drunk, I mean we're friends, right? Roommates? This whole thing would complicate that, So I'm just gonna go over to Kiba's for a bit, work things out, give you time to work things out. Then I'll come back here and this whole thing wired out a laugh." Sasuke's face was slowly transforming, melding into something hard and untouchable. Naruto's mouth dried at the sight. Dear Lord, he thought, I'm not going to make it out alive. Alright. Well, later. Naruto slithered into his shirt and hastily backed towards the door, afraid that if he turned his back on the raven he'd be jumped from behind. Where do you think you're going? Sasuke growled, and Naruto jumped. I told you I'm going to Kiba's. Feeling around behind him, Naruto's fingers searched for the doorknob. Sasuke was struggling with the covers, his face screwed up in a cloud of anger. When Naruto's fingers brushed up against the cool metal of the doorknob, he sighed in relief and twisted it hard. The door swung open behind him and the blonde tumbled out into the hallway, where the thick silence of the early morning hung heavy in the air. Breathing a sigh of relief, Naruto watched the door for a second before he pushed himself to his feet, mind a mess of thoughts. Running his hands through his hair, he pulled out his phone to check the time. 7:36. Blowing out a sigh, Naruto leaned momentarily against the peeling plaster wall, trying to sort out his thoughts. He had been hopped up on beer last night, still high and horny from dancing with the stranger at Kiba's. Last night meant nothing. Sasuke was his friend. He felt absolutely nothing for the onyx-eyed bastard. Or did he? Scowling, the blonde banged his hand against the wall. No, he did not feel anything for the goddamned Uchiha. Shaking the thoughts clear from his head, Naruto continued until he was at the elevator, his reflection blurred and deformed in the silver metal. He pressed the down button and stared at the floor for a second, then looked back up. The air in his throat locked up as he saw the other form behind him. Turning quickly around, Naruto tried to open his mouth but was quickly cut off by a hard mouth on his. He was rammed up against the hard door of the elevator, Sasuke's mouth rough on his own, hands traveling up and under his shirt. Sasuke, oh god. Naruto tried to gain control back by pressing his hands roughly against Sasuke's chest, but failed as the elevator doors opened and he fell in, Sasuke following closely behind. The wind was violently knocked from Naruto's body, and Sasuke took advantage of the situation by straddling him, his hands at his shoulders, keeping him down. What do you mean? The raven asked, nodding his hands in the blonde's hair. Ow. Shit. Knock it off. Naruto hissed, glaring up at the Uchiha. We could go to breakfast or something other than you molesting me in the elevator at 8 in the morning. Sasuke cast Naruto a suspicious look before nodding. Fine. Naruto stared hard at his burger, appetite non-existent. He could feel the fire of Sasuke's stare and chose to avoid making direct eye contact to save himself from third-degree burns. Absently picking up a fry, he dipped it into ranch and popped it in his mouth, the saltiness spreading around his mouth satisfyingly. Kind of like Sasuke's jizz. Fuck, he thought, setting the fry down, I've got to keep myself together before I get a public boner. Images from last night exploded behind Naruto's eyes and he licked his lips, finally working up the nerve to look up at Sasuke. His eyes clashed with onyx orbs, staring intently at him, the dark lashes framing Sasuke's eyes fluttering every time he blinked. Sasuke, do you remember when we were younger? When we were just growing into teenagers? Naruto asked quietly, twirling his straw around with his finger. Yes, I do. I remember the strange feelings I had for you. How you would always make my skin tingle when we touched. How I would never want to stop touching you. I still feel that way. Sasuke murmured, and Naruto swallowed hard, and it felt like his blood had been replaced with a fizzy, bubbling concoction. I thought you'd outgrown that. That maybe it was just a phase for you, Naruto said, his voice breathy. Sasuke shook his head, tapping his finger absently against the wood. No, that's mostly why I became so brutal and cold, because I felt like I could never tell you how I felt. That's why I was always so cruel to you. I thought that maybe if I kept saying what I was saying to you, that it'd end up being true, that maybe it'd be the cure for me. Sasuke bit his lip, looking out the window. You know, I never should have treated you like that. I regret it every day of my life. But it never seemed to affect you. It was like my words were a bouncy ball and you were a wall of bricks. They would just bounce right off of you and propel back at me. Naruto was having a hard time listening to Sasuke. He was never like this, never so open and truthful and vulnerable. It was unnerving. Sasuke, I forgive you. But I want to know why you decided last night was the right time. Naruto finally spit out, lost in the beautiful landscape of Sasuke's skin and bone structure. A sharp laugh escaped his perfect lips, and he shook his head. I wasn't planning on it, believe me, but when I saw you dancing with that random motherfucking stranger, I just lost it. You have no idea what kind of torture it is to watch someone you've waited on forever to just merrily jump from person to person like you do. I get anxiety whenever you start a new relationship, wondering if you'll fall in love, get married, and leave me behind. I guess when I saw you humping this newcomer, I lost it. I couldn't take it anymore. Sasuke slammed his elbows on the table in frustration, running his pale fingers through his silky locks. A few people looked over, but Naruto ignored them, one question burning in his mind above all others. Why didn't you tell me earlier? You knew I was bi, so what was holding you back? Naruto trailed off, picking up his burger then putting it back down in irritation. All this talking had made it go cold. Naruto sucked his lower lip into his mouth and chewed on his tongue, trying to calm his racing heart and growing hope. He was still trying to sort through his emotions. Had last night really just been the beer for him? He didn't think so. When he looked back up and saw Sasuke staring at him, the breath left his throat in a rush. The look of pure lust and simple, furious need in his eyes made Naruto instantly hard, but he didn't even care. Sasuke, we can't. Naruto was cut off when Sasuke stood up, nearly knocking his chair down in the process. He leaned across the table, hefted Naruto up, threw a 20 down on the table, and left, his hand hard and firm against Naruto's wrist. Naruto looked up, confused, when Sasuke pushed them both through the front door of the restaurant and into the gloomy afternoon air. Sasuke, we need to talk more before we, dear lord. Naruto exhaled heavily when Sasuke pushed him up against the wall, grinding into him with his hips, possessiveness in his eyes that made Naruto close his eyes in pleasure. When had he become submissive? I think we've done quite enough talking for now, Sasuke spoke lowly, his eyes locking onto Naruto's and trapping them in his stare as he continued his ministrations, watching as he made Naruto's eyes glaze over in dizzying pleasure. We're in public, Naruto panted, letting out a strangled moan as Sasuke's hips collided roughly with his own, their organs rubbing up against each other through the fabric of their jeans. Sasuke had a small smile on his face, his eyes following Naruto's every movement, every buck and moan, watching as he tilted his head to the side and pant. Naruto couldn't think straight, not with the look Sasuke was giving him, nor the steady friction directed at his groin. Sasuke leaned in close, his breath fanning over Naruto in dizzying waves. Do you know how long I've wanted to do this with you? Sober? Make you pant like a bitch in heat and beg for more? Sasuke growled, his teeth snagging Naruto's earlobe and tugging. Jerking his hips in pleasure, Naruto whimpered. I'm going to pull every single thread of pleasure I can from you, and make you scream my name and my name only. I'm going to make you come SBLE to see straight for hours afterwards, and then do it again. You're mine, Naruto, no one else's. Sasuke growled, roughly pinning Naruto back against the wall of the restaurant with his hips, his hands sliding down to the waistband of Naruto's jeans. His fingers ran along the bare strip of skin that had been revealed when Naruto's shirt shucked up, causing the blonde to shiver in delight. Just as Sasuke's hands had crept under Naruto's shirt, someone yelled at them. Sasuke was still pinning Naruto against the wall, but his hips ceased their pressure, and his hands slid down to his sides, clenched tightly in fists. Naruto watched as Sasuke turned around slowly, and then tense up all over, like someone had just electrified him. Naruto groggily pushed himself off the wall and peered over Sasuke's shoulder. And blinked. It was the guy who had danced with Naruto last night, and he was looking at him like he wanted to eat Naruto up. What are you doing here? Sasuke hissed, his hand pushing Naruto back protectively. The blonde looked over to Naruto, his face a mask of lust and unfinished business. Naruto felt his body respond to that look, and he pressed himself hard against the wall to keep from bucking his hips in wanton need. I wasn't following him, but I saw an interesting scene over here. When I got a closer look, I saw it was that guy from last night, and I just wanted to come back over here and get his name. And maybe save him from some unwanted attention. The guy glared over at Sasuke, his clear blue eyes full of dislike and annoyance. In the light of day, Naruto could pick out his features more clearly now, and was even more attracted to the guy. This was absurd, considering Sasuke was right next to him, his hand wrapped protectively around Naruto's own. I'm Deidara, and your name is? The boy, Deidara, asked, looking around Sasuke's shoulder at Naruto. His blonde bangs were long and covered a good portion of the left side of his face, and his long locks were pulled back into a ponytail. Naruto, the fox stuttered, and Sasuke turned his head sharply in Naruto's direction, his face transforming into a mask of fury. Deidara smirked in satisfaction and sidled up close to Naruto, slipping his hand into the back pocket of the blonde's jeans, warm fingers sliding slowly over Naruto's ass as he pulled away. Winking, he backed up a little, never losing eye contact with Naruto. "If you want a good time, call me baby. I'll be waiting." And with that, Deidara walked off, leaving Naruto confused and about ready to come all over the place, and Sasuke a boiling pit of volcanic lava. "I can't believe you gave him your fucking name." Sasuke exploded, turning quickly on Naruto, fists clenched in fury. "And then you let him insult me, and molest you without any complaint." Sasuke roared, his eyes full of jealousy and possessiveness, and that someone turned Naruto on. Running his hands slowly through his blonde locks, Naruto looked up at Sasuke, biting his lip. "I didn't do anything wrong. So what if I want a new friend? You can't have me all the time, Sasuke." Naruto purred, slinking over to Sasuke, who was panting hard, clenching and unclenching his hands. Sasuke reacted just how Naruto hoped he would. The blonde was suddenly slammed up against the very same wall he had been minutes before, but now Sasuke was a whole new type of mad. The raven curled his hands into Naruto's hair and pulled hard. Naruto winced at the pain but reveled in it at the same time, bucking his hips eagerly. He felt Sasuke's hot breath on his neck, and before he had time to react he felt the Uchiha's teeth sink into his flesh, almost breaking skin. Naruto arched off the wall with a cry, his hands clawing at Sasuke's shoulders when he felt a hot, slick tongue shoot out to caress the wound, sending shivers rippling up and down Naruto's body. Arching off the wall with a cry, Naruto's vision blurred for a second, and he exhaled, panting hard. Sasuke's mouth was suddenly on his, and pleasure exploded like starbursts throughout his body. His hands groped for Sasuke's shoulders, needing to pull him closer, to press his lips harder against the raven's. The velvet skin of Sasuke's lips was the match to ignite a roaring fire inside Naruto, and he desperately pressed Sasuke to him, their bodies joined like two puzzle pieces. Sasuke pulled back for air, and Naruto whimpered at the loss, wanting, needing the beautiful pressure of Sasuke's lips on his again. But Naruto was denied, and suddenly all the heat left his body. Sasuke had pulled away, leaving Naruto panting against the wall, his lips swollen and tingling. Looking up at the raven, Naruto swallowed. "Why'd you do that?" he asked hoarsely, knees weak. "Because I'm letting you have that precious time you needed to think things through this morning." Sasuke narrowed his eyes at Naruto. "I'll be back at our dorm. Don't come back until you have everything sorted out in that big head of yours." And with that, the raven turned and stormed off, leaving Naruto a panting mess behind him. Naruto's hands were shaking, and his brain was a frazzled mess. He knew he'd fucked up. He usually did. But he had already been horny as crap when Deidara had walked up to him. Not to mention a bit dizzy. Running his hand over his face, Naruto blew out a shaky sigh. First thing first, he needed to calm his throbbing erection that had become overwhelmingly painful inside his jeans. He considered going back into the restaurant's bathroom and start doing the deed but vetoed it, realizing other people might hear him. Sucking his lower lip into his mouth, Naruto was startled at how indecisive about keeping it or throwing it out. He imagined Sasuke's angry face, glowering down at him. Then Deidara's face appeared in his eyes, smiling and winking. He silently slipped the paper back into his pocket and pushed off the wall, shaking his head. He was going to go to the gym. He could pump his little problem into submission in the showers and then work his anger and stress into sweat and added muscle afterwards. It was an A+ plan all over. He decided to walk the few blocks that were between him and the gym, keeping his head ducked low to avoid any more unwanted confrontations. Pushing into the heated, sweat-smelling lobby of the gym, Naruto waved to the cute desk clerk, winking. She giggled and hid her mouth behind her hand. "Hello, Naruto. Back for yet another workout?" she asked, leaning forward, and Naruto happily noted her open for viewing cleavage. "A body like this doesn't come naturally," he said, giving her a devilish grin. She laughed again and beeped him through. He pulled open the glass doors and strode inside, walking down the hallway that had dedicated itself to all of its loyal members. Naruto spotted his picture and smiled. This place always made him feel loved. Shouldering his way into the men's locker room, Naruto discreetly headed directly towards the showering area, nodding to the few familiar faces he noted. Once he was in his own private stall, he shucked out of his clothes and threw them out of the range of the water. His throbbing member sprang free and shuddered as the steamy air embraced the skin. Naruto held in a groan and turned the water on, cranking the heat. Scalding fingers of water erupted onto his skin and Naruto cursed loudly, jumping out of the line of fire. He slowly turned the heat down, and tentatively slipped back into the steady stream of water. Sighing, he let the warm tendrils of liquid crawl along his skin, soothing his raging nerves. Naruto gasped, so close to the edge of his much-needed orgasm, his fingers squeezing and pulling at his length, tugging him closer and closer to the oblivion that was ecstasy. Just as he tumbled into sweet paradise, someone barged into the shower room, startling Naruto. He quickly tried to quiet his unbridled moans but failed, needing to ride out his pleasure as long as possible. "Looks like someone's doing the dirty, he heard someone ask through his cloud of bliss. "Let's leave him to it, why don't we?" a quiet voice asked, and Naruto leaned his head against tower. He hoped that the first guy listened to his friend and left him to recover. "But Gaara, don't you want to know who it was?" the first voice asked, and the second person, Gaara, did not respond right away. "No, he probably can hear us now, anyway. Haven't you noticed he's stopped?" Gaara responded. There was a following silence and Naruto felt himself stiffen with awkwardness. "Sigh, let's go. He obviously wants us gone. Sorry, stranger." Gaara apologized, and then Naruto heard the door open and close. Breathing out a sigh of relief, he leaned back against the tile once more, and then turned the warming water off, needing to get his head on straight. Throwing the slick shower curtain aside, Naruto pushed his warm body out into the steamy vacuum of the showering area. Swallowing large amounts of air, Naruto grabbed the nearest towel and wrapped it around his waist, tying it securely in the back. Cautiously stepping out from the showering area, Naruto was met with a brutal cold that arced up his spine and enveloped him in ice. "Holy shit!" he cursed, wrapping his arms protectively over his bare upper torso as he raced for his clothes. Shucking the towel off, Naruto dried himself as fast as possible, warming his frigid skin. Then he slipped his black, loose shorts on that covered his knees. Pulling a white, stained shirt over his tanned chest, Naruto ran the towel quickly through his golden locks, shaking out his hair like a dog before standing up and tossing the towel into his locker. Pushing out of the locker room, the blonde walked down the hallway, peeking in the glass-protected tennis courts curiously. He saw in one court two girls with tight white shorts on, their hair pulled up into ponytails, releasing feminine grunts every time the racket hit the green ball. Naruto felt his face flush at the sounds and quickly walked by, peering into the next court. He nearly shit his pants. It was the fucker Deidara from earlier, his hair still pulled back, but he held his blonde bangs up with a red bandana. He was wearing short, not to mention tight, black shorts, and a frame-hugging black tank top. Naruto pushed his fear down and ducked his head low, turning it a bit to the side so the man couldn't see his face. There was a loud smack that resonated from within the shinning tennis court, and Naruto winced, hurrying his pace along. He could not sort his muddled brain out with Mr. Tall, blonde, and handsome knowing he was here. Making his way out of the danger zone, Naruto thankfully pushed into the gym, which smelled familiarly of sweat and cheap cleanser. Nodding to the few people in running on the treadmills, Naruto made his way over to the weightlifting section, sliding two 80-pound weights onto his barbell. Sliding under the seat, Naruto thankfully lost his train of thought to the mindless task of working out. A couple hours later, Naruto grabbed a sweat rag, mopping his face up. Panting a little, he reveled in the afterglow of his intense workout. Blowing air out of his lips, Naruto grinned at the girls who were daintily running on the treadmill. They giggled and flipped their ponytails over their shoulder. Chuckling, Naruto exited the gym feeling loads better than he had previously. Taking his water bottle, he sprayed the rest in his hair, and then scrubbed his hands through his hair. He walked back over to the locker room, contemplating taking another shower. He decided it would be for the better of mankind if he showered again, so once he got into the locker room he stripped himself of his sweaty clothes, then waltzed into the showers once again, keeping the water cool, unlike last time. Running his palms over his face and body, Naruto removed all the dirt and sweat he had acquired during his hours in the gym. He was so intent on washing his body, he didn't hear when the shower room's door was opened. Just as he was lathering the bar soap in his hands, he heard a voice that caused him to drop the soap. "Hey, babe. Mind if I join you in the shower, yeah?" Deidara. Naruto sucked in a quick breath, bending over hastily to pick up the dropped soap. Naruto contemplated responding to the blonde, but chose not to, knowing that it would only make the situation worse. Instead he finished covering his body in suds, trying to make the least amount of noise. "Ah, don't be that way, sweet thing. You like dancing with me at the party, yeah? Don't let that stick in the mud get in the way of that, yeah?" Naruto bristled but remained quiet, sucking his lower lip into his mouth. He was going as slow as possible, hoping to ward off the unwelcome man. Or, maybe only slightly unwelcome. "You know how easy it would be for me to just flip the shower curtain open?" The other male persisted, and Naruto let out a frustrated growl. He was never known for his patience anyway. "No. Goddamn it, Deidara. Don't you even think about it," Naruto yelled, ready to punch the guy in the face if he tried. Instead he heard a dry chuckle carry over to his ears, and Naruto's eyes narrowed. Turning off the water, Naruto stood in the lukewarm air, waiting for a further response from the blonde man. "Can I bargain with you, sweet Naruto?" Deidara asked, and Naruto stiffened when he heard him take a couple steps closer. "How about, you agree to go to lunch with me, and I won't come in there and molest your tight, tan ass, yeah?" Naruto smirked, his excuse already forming on the tip of his tongue. "Sorry, but I already had lunch. Coffee, then," Naruto groaned, banging his head against the tile. He instantly regretted it. Rubbing his head, he watched as Deidara's hand crept around the side of the curtain, and Naruto's eyes went wide. "Yes, fine, I'll go. Just give me a fucking towel, you damn shitwad," Naruto growled, and he heard the other man chuckle. A few seconds later, Deidara was offering him a white, fluffy towel. Grabbing it from his hands, Naruto wrapped it firmly around his lower half, annoyed that Deidara had picked the smallest of the towels. Whipping the shower curtain open, Naruto was met with the same Deidara he had seen early, outside of the gym. He had already changed back into his normal clothes, and his bandana had been abandoned. As Naruto stepped out of the shower, the other blonde grinned at him, flicking his bangs out of his face. "Nice body, sweet cheeks. That shows some dedication, yeah." Deidara winked and Naruto couldn't help the blush that overtook his face. "Just don't watch me change, please?" Naruto asked, and thankfully, Deidara respected his wishes. He slid out the locker room door, promising the fox he would meet him by the entrance. Naruto slowly changed back into his jeans and orange shirt that had his favorite ramen shop's logo printed on the front. Needless to say, it was his favorite shirt. After he shook out his hair, Naruto grudgingly left the locker room, feeling refreshed nonetheless. While he had switched between lifting weights and running, Naruto had thought long and hard about his relationship with Sasuke, and had decided firmly that he had been an idiot to act that way around Deidara. But now that he walked down the hallway, the lean blonde in his sight, Naruto couldn't help the little flutter that whispered across his stomach. Stopping next to the check-in desk, Naruto waved to the girl sitting there, who gushed and turned away, blushing. Deidara watched the whole scene with amused blue eyes. He unhitched himself from the wall and walked with Naruto out of the gym, into the cool nearing twilight air. "Are you just teasing her, or are you bi?" Deidara asked. His hands in his jacket pockets as the two walked down the gym's sidewalk and to the road, where Naruto pressed the walk button with his thumb. "I'm bi. I'm not that cruel," Naruto answered, throwing an amused glance over to Deidara, who sniggered and nodded in response. Naruto silently processed as Deidara led him to the coffee shop, thinking of an appropriate response. He kicked a lone pebble under his feet repeatedly as he pondered the correct way to answer. He finally gave up, and decided to ask another question. "Did you follow me to the ND?" He glanced over at Deidara, who was smirking. He flicked his bangs out of his face for a second, staring ahead. He then glanced over to Naruto, and the look in his eyes made his breath stutter out. Then Deidara looked up suddenly, coming to a halt. "We're here, yeah. Best coffee in town." The blonde grinned down at Naruto and opened the door, ushering the tanned boy inside. Naruto took in his surroundings, before he felt a warm hand pressing into his spine. Jumping and turning around, he sent an accusatory look at the taller blonde, who just smirked down at him. Naruto was then slid into a table by the large glass window, and he happily looked out at the busy streets. Deidara sat himself in the chair across from Naruto, cracking his knuckles. Naruto's attention was drawn once again to the intriguing blonde, and he remembered he had asked him a question. "Oi, you never answered my question. Did you follow me to the gym?" Deidara chuckled softly, before absently playing with his bangs. "But yes, then I did follow you to the gym. I have a membership there as well," Deidara explained, and then he suddenly held up his hand, flagging down a waitress. Naruto's eyes were drawn to his palm, which had the most peculiar tattoo of a mouth with a tongue hanging out on it. Frowning, Naruto leaned around to check his other palm. Sure enough, there was another, identical mouth on his other hand. The waitress came over, smiling at both Deidara and Naruto, flipping open her notepad. "What can I get you?" she asked, and Deidara ordered a chocolate chip frappe. Naruto, at a loss, dumbly ordered the same thing. After she left, Deidara turned to look at the other blonde. "Why do you get those tattooed on your palm?" Naruto asked boldly, running his own forefinger over his palm as he watched Deidara inspect the skin of his hand. "I have a love of art, you could say," he grinned up at Naruto, who was still staring wonderingly at the tattoos. The waitress soon came back with their drinks, and set them down in front of the boys. She grinned at both of them, again, before skipping away. Naruto looked down at his drink, grasping the cool plastic of the see-through cup with his hands and shaking it once. Deidara was already sipping his, moving the straw around with his full lips. He looked up at Naruto and smirked, licking his lips free of the cool frappe. "Well, what are you waiting for? Yeah, isn't that what you ordered?" Naruto looked down at his drink again and shrugged, bringing the straw hesitantly to his lips. He heard a huff of laughter and looked up once more. "It's not poisoned, yeah. And if it is, it's worth it." Deidara chuckled, raising his eyebrows. Naruto grinned back, sipping up the drink into his mouth. Once the cool drink touched his tongue, he started at its coolness and texture, but then instantly enjoyed the taste on his tongue, crunching the chocolate chip between his teeth. He laughed, glancing around. Then he made eye contact with a grinning blonde and rolled his eyes, sipping the drink eagerly into his mouth. The guy wasn't so bad. Once he was done being a pervert, Naruto decided as he finished off his drink. Deidara flagged the waitress down and paid, winking playfully at her before slipping her a tip as he stood up. She blushed and wobbled away, and Naruto grinned over at Deidara. "Well, that was nice. Did you enjoy yourself, yeah?" the taller blonde asked, and Naruto found himself nodding, walking out of the door with him, the bells jingling merrily behind them. "Yeah, it was nice, after I got over the stalker part. We should do it again sometime," Naruto said, and the other man smiled. "I'll hold you to it," and with that, he walked off down the street. Shoving his hands into his pockets, Naruto walked around the streets for a while, chewing on the gum he had bought at the gas station not too far away from the coffee shop Deidara had taken him to. He kept walking and walking, for no apparent reason other than the day was nice, the air refreshing to his system. He finally decided that it was time to confront Sasuke, even thought that might not be the most pleasant thing to do. Turning towards the street that would take him to his and Sasuke's dorm, Naruto quickened his pace, the thought of the raven sending a flittering through his stomach, shivers racing across his skin as he thought of those dark, so very intense eyes. Swallowing, Naruto tried to control where his thoughts were taking him, down a dark alleyway that Naruto so desperately wanted to explore. But, he didn't want to go there in the middle of the sidewalk with swarms of people walking by him. He would much rather explore that dark, mysterious place with the dark, mysterious person. The mere thought released excited butterflies within his stomach, and Naruto, so wrapped up in his thoughts of the raven, didn't notice he had reached his dorm until he saw a flash of pink and recognized Sakura. She was talking to someone random, and had Naruto not been nearly to the edge of anxiousness with the impending confrontation with Sasuke, he would have stopped to chat. But instead, he pushed past and towards the building, opening the door and walking into the lobby of the building. Pressing the up button on the elevator, Naruto bounced on the balls of his feet, jiggling his hands and biting his lip. When the silver elevator doors opened, Naruto's memory activated and he closed his eyes at the pleasant thought of Sasuke's lips on his skin, making it hard to breathe. Slipping inside the metal compartment, Naruto silently watched the metal doors slide close. Blowing air out through his lips, He tilted his head back and looked at the blank roof of the elevator, contemplating his words to Sasuke. The conversation could go so many ways. It made Naruto nervous to think about. Earlier his chances of rejection were close to nothing, considering Sasuke had just laid his feelings out on the table crisply and cleanly. But now, he wasn't so sure. While his afternoon had been filled with sweat, Deidara, and a mind-cleansing walk, Sasuke's had probably been filled with frustration and simmering anger. The shiny doors quietly opened again, and Naruto took a step out into the hallway. He could see his dorm, about 5 doors down, and his gut decided to try an acrobatics act. Swallowing, he approached the dark wooden door cautiously. He rapped his knuckles once on the oak, before scowling at his foolishness. This was his dorm. Reaching down around in his pocket he groped for his keys, bringing them out and shoving them into the lock. Jerking it open, Naruto pushed into the dorm. The lights were dimmed, and the small, flat-screen TV that was the only other piece of furniture in the dorm other than a small, soft recliner was turned off. That very chair was occupied by a certain Uchiha, and Naruto's pulse quickened at the sight of the raven's perfect face, bathed in the soft glow of the lamp beside the bed. His dark hair brushed his eyebrows, and his perfect lips were gently relaxed. He held a book in his pale fingers, and he had both of his legs out in front of him, unbent, making them appear even longer. "Hey, Sasuke." Naruto started, stepping inside and closing the door behind him with a sound click. The other boy didn't even look up, just grunted in response, and Naruto watched as he turned another page. Sasuke had taken the cover off of the hardback. A little quirk that amused Naruto to no end, so the blonde couldn't see the title. Shucking his white tennis shoes off his feet, Naruto padded over to where Sasuke sat, and placed himself on the corner of his bed, watching the Uchiha. "So, what are you reading?" Naruto tried again, anxiousness curling around in his stomach. The dark-haired boy sighed and looked up from his book, his onyx eyes meeting Naruto's own bright blue ones. "What do you want, Dobi? To talk? About what? I don't think there's anything to talk about." "I beg to differ. Beg all you want. I don't want to talk. I want to read my book." "What book is it? For the love of God, Naruto. It's the yearling. Are you satisfied? You're reading that? Is that a kind of surprising? How? Don't get me wrong, but you just don't seem like the kind of guy to read about a baby deer and farmers. But hey, you proved me wrong." Naruto was met with silence, and he chewed on his lip as he stared at the wall in front of him. He had to get the words out. He didn't care if they sounded stupid or not. "Sasuke. I don't know really how to, say this, because in my opinion there was never a choice. But if you ever thought there was something between me and Deidara, you're wrong. I don't really know why I have to explain that." Naruto sat silently for a minute, thinking over his words. Then a blush coated his cheeks. "Oh, yeah. I kind of do. About, Deidara getting cozy with me. I didn't push him off 'cause I was just, surprised. Plus I had just had you all over me and," Naruto swallowed, feeling an embarrassed burn in his stomach every time another word left his mouth. He had never been good with words like Sasuke. Screw it. Listen, Sasuke. I suck at explaining this, but I want to be with you. I always have. It's never been a choice for me." Naruto kept staring intently at the wall, but he heard Sasuke put his book down, and the small action encouraged Naruto further. "I was yours since I first laid eyes on you, all those years ago." The blonde dropped his head and puffed out his lips, running his hand through his wild locks, staring idly down at the ramen logo. There was a soft rustle next to him and Naruto felt a warmth beside his neck, sending his senses into overdrive. Smooth hands coasted over Naruto's nape, and the boy shivered. "You make perfect sense, Naruto," Sasuke whispered against his ear, his lips sending electric shockwaves rocking through Naruto's body. Oh, that's good," Naruto breathed, twisting his head to look at the porcelain-skinned boy. His dark eyes had dropped lower, his lower lip sucked into his mouth. The sigh made heat pool low and deliciously in the pit of his stomach. Sasuke leaned forward, and Naruto instinctively leaned back, until he fell onto the bed's mattress, bouncing slightly. Sasuke climbed limberly onto the bed, stretching onto Naruto so his lips were positioned just above his exposed neck, his long limbs trapping Naruto's own. "You know something that I found peculiar, though, Naruto?" Sasuke whispered, feather soft against Naruto's erratic pulse. Quietly humming in question, Naruto arched off the bed when he felt the raven bite his neck, calling out his name desperately, his breathing heavy. Lust coursed through his body, lighting his skin on fire. Sasuke's lips caressed the spot he had just tortured, his hot, soft tongue lapping sincerely at it, as if apologizing. Then he bit Naruto's neck again. A strangled gasp tore from Naruto's body, and he bucked up against Sasuke's legs. The pain wasn't simply pain. Not from Sasuke. It vibrated through his body, the pain branching out and breaching the sweet gates of pleasure, sending blood straight down to Naruto's member. I noticed that fucking blonde followed you to wherever you went. Sasuke growled into Naruto's ear, and the sensation of his voice distracted Naruto from answering for a second. To the gym, Naruto answered, his body fidgeting from the lack of Sasuke, and then arched off the bed with another cry when Sasuke pinched his side, hard. To the gym? Then where? Sasuke's lips brushed over the shell of Naruto's ear, taking his attention away from the hand crawling up his chest. Naruto opened his mouth, then closed it, breathing hard, his body vibrating with sensations as Sasuke dominated him. Sasuke then forcefully yanked down his underwear, ridding Naruto officially of all the clothing he had been wearing. Sasuke grinned down at the helpless Uzumaki under him, sliding out of his own jacket, but keeping his jeans and shirt on. He bent lower to Naruto's pert nubs, flicking his tongue over one experimentally. The blonde responded with a cry and a longing thrust of his hips, tanned hands gripping the now rumpled bed sheets. That's never going to happen again, Naruto. Understand me? Sasuke purred against his ribcage. Naruto nodded without comprehension, just wanting to make Sasuke please. A sudden, sharp pain bloomed across his stomach, and Naruto jackknifed up, surprised. Sasuke smirked at him, pushing him roughly back down before straddling him, thrusting his hips against Naruto's bare erection. The pleasure that shot through him was so intense Naruto thought he might come right then. Moaning out loudly, Naruto's whole body jerked in response to the sudden pleasure. That's a good Naruto. You like it when I do this, don't you? Sasuke whispered into Naruto's neck, and the tanboy whimpered. Sasuke violently began to gyrate against Naruto, eliciting wanton moans and deep groans from the submissive boy. Naruto's hands came to rest on Sasuke's covered chest, and he growled in irritation. Fisting the cotton in his hands, the Uzumaki ripped the shirt over Sasuke's head, throwing it distastefully to the floor. Returning his hands to the dark-haired boy's overheated skin, Naruto took sinful pleasure in the satin smooth feel of Sasuke's body. A tension was building slowly in Naruto's groin, a coil tightening. Raggedly breathing, Naruto pushed up onto his elbows to watch as Sasuke bobbed his head up and down his length, his hands gliding over the blonde's tan skin, bringing forth pleasure from every cell in the blue-eyed boy. The coil inside him was becoming almost unbearable, and as Sasuke's tongue ran up and down Naruto's throbbing veins, the coil snapped. Sasuke trailed his hands back down to Naruto's ass, where he gently skimmed the round globes of muscle, kneading them between his fingers. Naruto sighed into the pillow, before he felt Sasuke's hands slip away. Frowning, he was about to lean up when stinging pain kissed his ass cheeks, and he cried out, flopping back down into the mattress, mouth open in shock. Sasuke had just spanked him. He felt the dark-haired boy's body press against his back as he leaned into his ear and whispered, "Let's play a game, I spank you for every time you've annoyed me. Sounds like fun." Sasuke grinned against his skin, sinking his teeth into the soft flesh before returning back. Naruto whimpered and let his head drop, but something inside him was responding the sadistic way Sasuke was treating him, and excitement laced through his blood. He sucked in a big breath just as Sasuke's hand came down against his ass, making Naruto cry out. He then felt soft hands trace over the singing skin, and wanted to sigh in relief, before he was brutally smacked again. Naruto cried out louder, and another smack cracked again, and Naruto bit his lip hard, panting into the sheets, eyes tearing up slightly. Sasuke was relentless, and soon Naruto couldn't take any more. "Sasuke, please. Stop, it hurts." Naruto breathed out, squeezing his eyes shut at the echoing pain. Instantly the hand receded, and was replaced with a soft, velvety mouth. Soft kissed ghosted over Naruto's burning ass, cooling the damage done by his hand. Naruto whimpered in appreciation, letting his head drop before he felt soft hands gently rub his skin, relaxing the blonde into a state of simple bliss, before Sasuke's thumb slipped between his crack and prodded at his puckered entrance, pressing into it, seeking access. Soon Sasuke wiggled his way into Naruto, making the fox gasp and close his eyes at the much-remembered sensation. Sasuke's thumb wiggled a little inside Naruto before touching the inner walls of the blonde, making the boy jump and moan. He soon inserted another digit, stretching Naruto's tried entrance again. He plunged both fingers into Naruto roughly, and his fingers searched for that spot inside Naruto, the one that would make him forget about all his pain, and only know pleasure. The searching ceased when Naruto bucked his hips with a loud groan, his breathing heavy and labored. "Come for me, Naruto." Those words sent Naruto into a headfirst dive into pleasure, as he obeyed Sasuke's command, his orgasm ripping through him hard and fast. He shot his load EVT and spilling onto the sheets. He felt Sasuke collapse on top of him, and Naruto went down too, the pair lying in a tangled heap on the bed, panting and bone-tired. Sasuke turned over and laced his hand through Naruto's before drifting off into a dreamless sleep. Naruto looked at him through glazed eyes before squeezing his hand and following him into a beautiful black oblivion. Naruto awoke sleepily, and a sense of déjà vu nearly crushed him as he felt a familiar heat against his back. Closing his eyes slowly, Naruto smiled, pressing up closer against his raven. He smirked, the thought alluring and giddying at the same time. There was a soft rustle behind the blonde and Naruto fought to hold still, but ended up twitching and jerking like mad. There was an annoyed grunt from behind his shoulder, and then he suddenly felt warm lips pressing a soft kiss to his bare shoulder. Naruto let out a sigh. "You just don't know how to wake people up, do you?" Sasuke's deep voice rumbled in Naruto's ear. Shivers glided down the fox's neck and he suppressed a shiver. Turning over on his side, he grinned at the raven. It was so much nicer waking up and not being confused, not having to internally battle with himself. Sasuke's face held remnants of sleep, his edges softened, eyes warm and gentle. It made Naruto's heart thump louder in his chest. He could get used to this Sasuke. "I was trying to be still," Naruto defended, his eyes following Sasuke's hand as it trekked a path across the bedsheets to his chest, delivering a feather-light touch to his tanned skin. Naruto sucked his lower lip into his mouth and pushed Sasuke's hand away gently. No way am I doing that again. I can't handle my ass being pounded 3 times in the course of 24 hours, babe, as much as I'd like to be able." Sasuke grinned up at him, shaking his head slightly. "Babe, I'm not sure I like how that sounds," Sasuke hummed. "Well, what do you want me to call you?" Naruto asked irritably. "Maybe, master. Or lordship. Either of those should do," Sasuke said, smirking down at Naruto. "How about sunshine? No, come on, please. That's so perfect." "No, hold on, just listen to it. Hey, sunshine, how's it crackalakin'?" "No and crackalakin'? It's a word, I don't think so." "Look it up." Sasuke rolled his eyes, bringing his mouth down towards Naruto's swiftly, crushing their lips together. Naruto jumped, his eyes widening. Then he slowly responded, winding his arms around Sasuke's back and pulling him closer, moaning softly when he felt the raven's tongue against his lower lip. His mouth opened readily, and their tongues twirled and slid against each other erotically. Sasuke's hands were carding through Naruto's soft hair, his soft moans echoing into Naruto's mouth. Breaking away, Naruto turned and breathed into his pillow, a blush lighting his cheeks. Sasuke seemed intensely pleased with himself. Bringing his head back up, Naruto made sure to direct his words off somewhere so his breath wouldn't reach Sasuke's nose. "Morning breath," Naruto said, gesturing to his mouth. Sasuke frowned as he realized this, and his face illuminated red. He backed quickly away from Naruto, biting his lip. Naruto laughed, standing up slowly and walking to their small, but thankfully private, bathroom. Grabbing his toothbrush, he quickly brushed his teeth, smiling a foamy-mouthed smile at Sasuke as he walked in behind Naruto. The Uchiha rolled his eyes at Naruto, picking up his own toothbrush and beginning to clean his teeth as well. They both bent down to spit out the toothpaste at the same time, and Naruto's head collided with Sasuke's, who tumbled into the wall and accidentally spit all over Naruto's face. The blonde spit out his toothpaste into the sink slowly, keeping his eyes closed and his hand clenched tightly on his toothbrush. Sasuke, he ground out, low and demanding. The raven bit his lip to contain his laughter and quickly grabbed a towel, wiping off the blonde's face. Once Naruto was toothpaste clean, he opened his eyes and glared at Sasuke. "That was disgusting, fucking Teme," Naruto said, and Sasuke grinned comically at him, his face lighting up. Naruto blinked, so stunned by the sight that his anger slipped momentarily, and he found he couldn't get it back. He tiredly shoved Sasuke out of the way, before realizing they were both naked. His face lit once more and he quickly hurried to bed. Before he could dive back into the safety of the sheets, however, Sasuke lightly smacked his ass. Naruto jumped and winced, his surprise taking away from the pain. Sasuke was never this playful. Come to think of it, Sasuke just wasn't playful. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the dark-haired boy, who smirked at him, walking at a leisurely pace back to the bed, and Naruto's eyes followed his every movement. He devoured the lithe way Sasuke's legs moved, the chiseled perfection of his chest, and finally, the soft, surprisingly amusing way Sasuke's member flopped along when flax. Naruto's eyes snapped up to Sasuke's and he grinned. Sasuke raised a delicate eyebrow before leaning down over Naruto, his face inches away, his now minty breath washing pleasantly over Naruto's face. "We could go to Ichiraku's," Sasuke recommended lightly, and he felt Naruto jump in his arms. Soon the blonde was wiggling and squirming, an excited ball of joy. "Can we go now?" he asked, turning back to Sasuke. The raven looked over at the electric clock on the wall, a frown creasing his eyebrows. It was 4:12 a.m. He raised his eyebrows at Naruto, who was already searching around for his boxers, his ass high in the air. "Hey, what are you doing just sitting around? Get your lazy ass up and get dressed," Naruto called excitedly, hopping on one foot as he tried to pull on his boxers. Sasuke watched him idly from the bed, before he pointed to the clock. Naruto looked over and his face fell instantly, his boxers dropping to the floor with a soft puff of air. He ran his hands tiredly over his face, and Sasuke bit his lip to hide his grin as forlornness poured off the blonde in waves. "We'll just have to wait a little bit, it'll be fine," Sasuke grunted, and Naruto sniffed, looking up at him. He hesitantly crawled back into bed, resting his back on the headboard. He thumped the back of his skull against the wood a few times before Sasuke stuck his hand in between the wood and his blonde's head, preventing him from doing it another time. "We could play, truth or dare?" Sasuke asked, secretly hoping Naruto would agree. The fox shook his head, turning to look at Sasuke. His bright blue orbs pierced the raven, and he grumbled, pulling Naruto down and wrapping his arms around him, pressing his chest into the blonde's humming softly into his hair. He felt Naruto sigh, and then his hand came up to enclose one of Sasuke's own. Feeling sheepish and girly, but finding himself unable to resist, Sasuke pressed his lips against Naruto's ear lovingly, his heart about ready to blow with what he thought was love. The thought both excited and scared him at the same time. Naruto sighed softly, drifting off to sleep with the promise of ramen close in his mind. Sasuke also slowly slid off to sleep, but with thoughts of love and a certain blonde in his thoughts. Naruto awoke abruptly, his eyes snapping open as his dream bordered on painful. The room in front of him blurred slightly as his vision focused. He had been dreaming about mounds and mounds of ramen, all placed gloriously in front of him, taunting him with its delicious scent. He had been trapped inside a metal cage, forced to watch as random strangers came and ate it slowly in front of him. They had cast him smug glances, then stuck their tongues out at him. Finally, a last bowl of ramen had been placed in front of him. His cage was suddenly gone, and he had made a mad dash for his ramen. Before he could get there, however, Sasuke had set it on fire. Naruto had fallen to his knees, screaming his fury to the world. That was when he had woken up. Rubbing his eyes, the blonde boy groaned and turned over, staring down at Sasuke, who was still sleeping peacefully. Running his fingers through the raven's hair, Sasuke made a low grumbling sound before he turned away, pulling Naruto's pillow to his chest. Smirking, Naruto rolled his eyes and hopped off the bed, glancing at the clock. It was nearing 11:30. Naruto grabbed his boxers and quickly pulled them over his legs, followed by his pants. Glancing over at Sasuke, Naruto frowned when he saw he was still dead to the world. Bastard! Wake up! Naruto called, and Sasuke jackknifed up in bed, his eyes wide, his hair ruffled. The pale landscape of his chest was rising quickly, and his eyes latched onto Naruto instantly. Narrowing his dark orbs, the Raven didn't lose eye contact as he slid the covers off his body, stood up, and walked over to the blonde. Naruto smiled slowly up at the brunette. Sasuke's eye twitched as he glowered down at the tan boy. Do I need to teach you how to wake people up, you idiot? Sasuke growled, and Naruto smiled up at him, wiping the sleep from the other boy's eyes. Sasuke scowled and pulled back, but Naruto laughed anyways, grabbing Sasuke's jeans and throwing them at him. Sasuke started, then caught the pants before they dropped, and slid them over his legs. Naruto opened the door and glanced back, waiting for the Raven, who was still endearingly shirtless and woozy. Naruto. Shut the door. Sasuke snapped, and Naruto grinned, opening it wider. Just then, a girl walked by and casually peeked in, and upon viewing Sasuke Uchiha shirtless, fainted on the spot. Shit! Naruto exclaimed, jumping around the fallen girl like a baby deer around its mom. Sasuke quickly grabbed the closest thing to him, which happened to be Naruto's sweatshirt, and pulled it quickly over his head. Quickly heading out of the dorm, Sasuke pulled the door shut and grabbed the blonde, quickly walking away from the scene of the crime. Naruto was tumbling along beside him, casting glances over his shoulder to where the girl was. Sasuke heard him suck in a breath and turned around. The girl was stirring, and she sat up, putting a hand to her head before glancing behind her. When she saw Sasuke, her eyes bugged out of her head and she scrambled up, a wild daze in her eyes. Sasuke! I love you. I will bear your children, she screamed, and Sasuke bolted. Naruto fumbled along next to him, growling curses underneath his breath every time he hit a corner. Sasuke couldn't suppress his grin. Finally they reached the second elevator of the floor, and Naruto came to a grumbling stop. Straightening, he made as if to glare at Sasuke, but once his eyes laid on the raven-haired Uchiha, his face melted into a horribly contained closed-mouthed smile. Sasuke frowned at him, then looked down, and sighed. It was no secret that he was slimmer than Naruto, and also a bit taller. And so, with the blonde's sweatshirt on, it wasn't the best combination. The sweatshirt rose slightly over his waistband, revealing a smooth view of pale stomach. The rest of the sweatshirt was overtly baggy on him, hanging off him at every angle and contour of his body. Naruto smirked at him before turning and pressing the elevator button. You look hot, Uchiha. Shut up, it wasn't my fault she passed out. It kind of was. I can't help being naturally beautiful. You sound like me. Shut up, Uzumaki. See, I think I'm rubbing off on you. No, you're not. If anything, I'm rubbing off on you. Whatever you say, sunshine. I told you not to call me that. Naruto laughed and skipped into the elevator before Sasuke could land a punch, and then stuck his tongue out at the fuming Raven. So, are you still gonna buy me ramen? Naruto asked, his eyes wide and begging. Sasuke glared down at him, narrowing his eyes menacingly. I never said I was going to buy you ramen, the proud Uchiha proclaimed, and Naruto rolled his eyes. Yeah, but, since we're dating now, I figured you'd be so kind as to buy me some ramen. Sasuke blinked, staring at Naruto like he had grown two heads and was sporting a tail. Did he just say? Clearing his throat, Sasuke coolly rolled his eyes, running his hands through his duck-tailed hair. Excitement ran through his blood, and he fought down an uncontrollable grin. Naruto noticed and winked at him, slinking up next to him, running his hand over the bare strip of stomach. Sasuke shivered and closed his eyes, his head falling against the wall of the elevator, which he hadn't realized had come to a stop. Naruto leaned in close to his ear, gently nipping the earlobe. Did you not think we were going out? Sasuke, I don't appreciate you thinking I would sleep around like that. Sasuke swallowed as Naruto pulled back, then glared at the satisfied-looking tan boy. That's awfully surprising, considering you. Naruto crushed his lips to Sasuke's, stealing the breath once again from his throat, scattering his thoughts, and altogether making the floor fall from under his feet. Sasuke moaned into the other boy's mouth, fisting his hands in his hair. Naruto was murmuring something against his lips, but Sasuke was too busy enjoying the feel of the other boy's rough, yet soft lips on his, grinding his hips up eagerly. Naruto pulled away slowly, eyes hooded and full of desire. "You're never going to let me live that down, are you? Fucking possessive bastard." Sasuke blinked and touched his lips before obediently following Naruto out of the elevator, unaware of his surroundings. "I think I like a dominant Naruto." Half an hour later, Sasuke found himself sitting next to Naruto, who was on his 13th bowl of ramen, reading a magazine that was focused around someone he hadn't even known existed prior to reading the trash. Yet here he was, discovering that they had been sucked into the wob, according to the magazine, World of Botox. Sasuke sighed and set down the slick paper on the table, watching Naruto munch happily away at his ramen. Brow wrinkling slightly as he took in the fascinating, bordering on disgusting, show of Naruto eating his meal. Sasuke shoved Naruto's shoulder. "You're going to get a stomachache eating all that, Naruto." "I don't care. Do I look like I care? I'm hungry," Naruto whined, and Sasuke glowered at him. "I'm not paying for another bowl." "Sasuke," Naruto complained, his eyes pleading, lip quivering. "No, I'm not made of money, Dobi. You kind of are." "No more ramen. Heesh, okay. You could have just said so." Sasuke ground his jaw together, watching the innocent-looking blonde. He was caught between wanting to pound him into the table and strangling him. Standing up, he threw a couple 20s on the counter and walked out of the store, Naruto following slowly behind, calling out his thanks as the door swung shut behind him. Jogging up next to Sasuke, Naruto elbowed him lightly in the stomach, grinning. "Thanks, HN." Naruto slipped his fingers through Sasuke's, and warmth traveled like fire through his veins, making every part of him glow. It felt so good to be able to do this, to be able to show the world that Naruto was his, and that they belonged together. Sasuke squeezed the blonde's hand once, a small smile on his face, all annoyances previously forgiven. Naruto slipped his other hand into his back pocket as they walked, and Sasuke felt him start a bit before continuing walking like nothing had ever happened. When they arrived at a crosswalk, Naruto came to a halt, tugging Sasuke to a stop with him. "I have to take a whiz," Naruto said bluntly, and Sasuke's nose crinkled. "You're prude. When did you become the Queen of England? When did you become a blabbering hillbilly? Can I go to the bathroom?" Sasuke sighed and glared down at the blonde, who was staring up at him, straight-faced. As the Raven watched, a small battle seemed to take place on the tan boy's face, and then his angelic features cleared, although they didn't look untroubled. Straightening, Naruto slipped his hand into his back pocket again, and brought forth a piece of paper, a small slip. Sasuke's eyes narrowed and anger bloomed in his chest when he saw it was from Deidara. "Why do you still have that?" Sasuke growled, clenched from reaching out and ripping it to shreds. Naruto stared evenly right back, keeping the paper a safe distance away from the boiling Raven. "I wanted to put his number in my phone," Naruto started, and Sasuke huffed, seeing red. "And since you're my boyfriend, and a very possessive one at that, I decided it would be best to tell you that I was going to put his number into my phone, so you wouldn't kill me in my sleep if I hadn't told you." Naruto finished, pulling out his phone as he talked. Sasuke started at it in growing bewilderment, the boyfriend cooling his ragged nerves. "But if we're dating, then why do you want his number?" Sasuke asked, his eyes watching as Naruto began to type the numbers in, and with each click, Sasuke felt like the cursed blonde was tattooing himself into his life. Once Naruto was done, he looked up, smiling softly. "I think he's a cool guy, Sasuke. You can't go getting jealous of everyone I talk to. Before long you'll be getting jealous of Kiba." "Kiba?" Naruto exclaimed a second time, laughing to himself as if the idea were absurd. To Sasuke, however, the possibility seemed likely. But then, didn't everything seem like it was going to rip Naruto away now? Maybe Sasuke was getting a bit possessive. Sighing and running a hand over his face, the Raven pulled Naruto into a warm embrace, cradling him close to his heart before letting go. "Uzumaki, what am I going to do with you?" "I don't know, Uchiha, I don't know." Unlocking his phone, Naruto clicked on the blonde boy's contact and sent him a text. "Naruto. Hey, Deidara. May I ask who this is?" "Naruto. Naruto you." "Deidara. Naruto. I like the hinting at your last name, mysterious." "Naruto lol. Not too much, but whatever floats your boat." "Deidara. Lots of things float my boat. Naruto. That wasn't a come on. That's just something I know you like. Naruto. Naruto. Lol. Nah, but thanks for the offer. Can I call you Day? Deidara. Most people do. Naruto. Are you doing anything right now? Deidara. I'm breathing. Converting oxygen into carbon dioxide. Naruto. I'm at work. Things are pretty slow. Wanna come down? Deidara. See, I knew you were lacking a nice, hearty laugh. Where do you work? Naruto. All-nighter. Deidara. No way. I love that place. Be over in a couple years. Naruto. What? As Naruto stared at his phone in confusion, trying to decide whether he should be insulted or amused, the door to the bar swung open and Deidara himself walked in, grinning brightly. Naruto looked up and smiled, waving the blonde over cheerfully. I couldn't figure out what you were trying to say, Naruto told him as the taller man came to a stop across the bar. I like to keep my prey confused, yet curious. Deidara explained, examining his nails before looking up and winking at Naruto. Flushing, the blonde shook his head, leaning his forearms on the table. Look, Deidara, it's not that I don't want to be around you, but I'm with Sasuke. And as much as I'd like to go at it with you, I can't. And even if you tried, I'm so caught up in that damned raven I couldn't do it with you anyway. But I didn't ask you here just so I could tell you that. Just wanted to make it apparent before things continued. Deidara was still for a moment, then he grinned up at Naruto. You're a pretty cool guy, Naruto. I'm okay with being just a friend to you. As long as you don't mind if I flirt. I can't take that away, right? It's in my nature, just like it's in yours. Deidara winked, and leaned forward, pressing his palms against the counter. Naruto rolled his eyes and laughed, noticing the black nail polish the man was wearing. Pointing to it, he rose his eyebrows in question. Like I said at the coffee shop, babe, I have a kind of, passion for creativity. It's in my blood. Don't deny me my rights of creativity of expression either. My god, man, have you no heart? Naruto laughed, tapping one of the blonde's fingernails before nodding to a forlorn-looking customer who had just rolled into the shop, like a lone tumbleweed. Walking over to where the man plunked down on one of the circular chairs, Naruto absently wiped off the counter as he waited for the man to order. He was attractive, with dark hair, eyes, ghostly pale skin and full, pouty lips. He slumped forward in defeat, his dark locks falling into his eyes. He looked like a black and white picture. What's troubling your poor soul tonight, man? Naruto asked, and the boy looked up, eyes wide and deep. Ino, she's mad, I don't know what did I do? He wailed, then looked up quickly, miserable. Just get me whatever will get me drunk the fastest. Something familiar tickled Naruto's brain, the tenor of the man's voice rubbing against a slight memory. Ignoring it, Naruto quickly prepared the man's drink, reluctantly setting it on the bar in front of him. Then something else tickled his brain. Ino? As in Ino Yamanaka? Naruto questioned, and he saw Deidara tilt his head towards their conversation curiously. The man nodded, his face confused yet hopeful. Naruto grinned, shaking his head. Do you know her? Yeah, she's like best friends with Sakura. Man, you can do almost anything to piss her off. What were you doing before she got mad? I was eating sashimi. I was just sitting there, and she walked in and flipped out. What does that even mean? Is she pregnant? Naruto grinned down at the guy, shaking his head slowly. That's her least favorite food. Yikes. Maybe you should go. Apologize? The man asked in a monotone, annoyance seeping through the cracks. Naruto blinked, all signs of the earlier heartbroken man gone. God. She's so, arg. He exploded, before standing up quickly and storming out of the bar. Naruto stood there for a second before turning back to Deidara, who was trying to suppress a grin. Boy, do you know how to fix people's problems, huh? Say, mind helping me with one? Sure. Naruto nodded, placing the forgotten drink in front of the taller blonde. Great. It's right down here. Deidara trailed off as he gestured to his pants, sticking his hand partially down his waistband. Deidara. Naruto exclaimed, laughing and going red in the face at the same time. Smiling, Deidara pulled his hands back out of his pants, just as Itachi walked out with a red-faced Kiba. When the dog boy saw Naruto, he flushed and quickly pulled out of Itachi's grasp, coughing into his palm. Naruto raised a suspicious eyebrow at the two before turning back to Deidara. But the blonde was focused on Itachi, a slight frown on his face. "Is that your boyfriend's brother?" he asked curiously, and Naruto nodded. Deidara raised his eyebrows and whistled slightly before turning back to Naruto with flourish. "Just between you and me, I would go to town on him, but blondes are more my type." The taller man still glanced over at Itachi, who was staring back, a devilish glint in his eyes. Naruto pursed his lips to hide his smile when he swore he felt the almost electric zing charge the air between the two older men. There was an aggressive, almost animalistic chemistry in the air, and Naruto stepped back a bit when Itachi started walking towards Deidara. Kiba looked relieved, sagging against the wall beside Naruto with a sigh. "Man, I thought I was gonna get attacked by that pervert in there. He kissed me." Kiba's voice squeaked on the word, kiss, and his face went red again. "All I want is to go home and text Hinata. But no, I have to stay in this empty bar and watch fucking Itachi pick up your leftovers." Naruto was caught between laughing and glaring. He opted for quietly grinning, letting his friend work over his emotional turmoil. "Dei isn't a leftover, he's a friend, and I think it's quite entertaining watching love bloom, don't you?" Naruto asked, his gaze focused on the couple as Itachi introduced himself. They were abrupt and almost rude with each other, like they were fighting for dominance. Suddenly, Itachi swept down and brought Deidara's lips to his hands going up to the blonde's ponytail, pulling it free. Tumbles of blonde hair fell free from Deidara's ponytail, like a girl. So much so, that Naruto caught Kiba drooling as he gazed at him. Elbowing him in the rib, Naruto grinned. "Maybe you are a little gay, Kiba?" "Shut up. He looks like a girl," Kiba muttered furiously, ducking his head. Deidara had narrowed his eyes, reaching behind Itachi's head to grasp his ponytail as well. Naruto watched in interest as both of the long-haired boys suddenly had their long locks falling gracefully down their spines. The blonde groaned, but pulled back quickly, straightening his tight shirt and running his hands through his hair. Itachi grinned slowly, his eyes traveling up and down Deidara. Naruto checked his phone's watch, and when he saw his shift was over, he gleefully said his goodbyes, Kiba wailing in misery behind him. Unlocking his dorm, Sasuke walked inside, forgetting to shut the door all the way before he fell into the one armchair they owned. Shucking off Naruto's sweatshirt, which he hadn't bothered to take off even when Naruto had skipped off to work, he slid down into the chair, his eyes half-masked and lazy. After Naruto had gone to work for his brother, he had originally walked back to the dorm, only to find the same girl that had been passed out earlier waiting for him, with hordes of other girls eagerly awaiting his arrival. Once they had caught sight of him, they had gone wild, stampeding him. Sasuke had run for his dear life, but it turned out that his fan club was nicely fit, and had kept him running for a good hour and a half before they had run down. Exhausted, Sasuke had wandered home. Running his hands over his face, his sighed and slumped down further, groaning. He just wanted Naruto to get home so he could curl up next to him and watch TV. There was a soft knock at his door, and Sasuke looked up in hope, thinking it was Naruto. He was wrong. Suigetsu stood in the doorway, the light outside framing his body. His white hair gleamed invitingly and he grinned. Sasuke rolled his eyes and fell back into the chair, resuming his stare down with the wall. "I see you're here alone," he said slowly, and Sasuke ignored him, watching the wall. He heard Suigetsu walk into the room more, and blinked when he switched on a light. "Why are you sitting here in the darkness?" Again. Sasuke chose to ignore the pale, purple-eyed boy. Ever since that one night, full of drunken and stupid mistakes, Suigetsu had been non-stop on Sasuke whenever Naruto wasn't near, constantly trying to get him into bed again. "Suigetsu, please, go away. I don't know how many times I have to ask you," Sasuke asked, and the white-haired boy just chuckled. Sinking to the floor opposite from Sasuke, Suigetsu just stared at the floor for a bit, chewing on his lip with his sharp teeth. "I was thinking," he started after a moment, "that you and we could be friends. I find myself enjoying your company, even when I'm not teasing you." The boy looked up at Sasuke with an indifferent look, and Sasuke stared back, narrowing his eyes. His first instinct was to decline the boy, tell him to leave him alone. However, after a moment's thought, Sasuke gave in, sighing and nodding. "Fine, Suigetsu. Friends. But only friends. I'm involved. Oh, yes, I assumed so. The pale boy sniggered at Sasuke, grinning. You spend almost every waking minute you have with him. And when he's not around, you wander like a lost puppy. That's another bonus. Whenever he's gone, you've got someone to kill time with. Maybe we could even kill Karen. Now that sounds like a good time. Sasuke smirked slightly before rolling his eyes, shifting his positions on the chair before biting his lip and looking at the time. Naruto should have been home by now. Suigetsu noticed and glanced at his phone before standing up, his tight purple shirt riding up slightly over his dark jeans. Shaking out his hair, he smiled once at Sasuke before leaving the apartment without so much as a goodbye. They would never be very talkative, like Naruto and Kiba, but it was something. Sasuke stood up, and his spine straightened immediately when he heard Naruto's voice outside the door, then Suigetsu's. There was a third, distinctly feminine voice, and Naruto quickly scrambled into their room. Sasuke watched as the blonde hurriedly shut the door. Just then, the sound of a body hitting the wall vibrated through their dorm and Naruto winced, a half-smile on his face. Karen and Suigetsu, he explained, and Sasuke grinned when he heard an enraged sound from the hallway. Karen. Knock it off. Bitch. Cut it out. Naruto grinned and then pulled something swiftly from behind his back, causing the raven's eyes to widen. Naruto had brought him a dozen roses, all wrapped neatly in white paper, their natural perfume filling the air. Sasuke opened his mouth once, eyes flicking between Naruto and the roses, a light, elated blush on his cheeks. The sounds of fighting seemed to fade from the world as Naruto sheepishly handed the roses over, scuffing his shoes on the floor. I was on my way home when I saw this flower shop, and I thought it would be a great idea, but if they're too girly I'll understand. Sasuke took them from Naruto, set them down on the end table, then crushed his lips to the blondes. The tan boy gave a low moan of appreciation, then wrapped his arms around Sasuke's neck. Their mouths clashed roughly, Sasuke's tongue tracing the soft skin of Naruto's lip, pulling shudders from the boy. Groaning into Naruto's mouth, Sasuke ground his hips once against the blonde. Naruto's breath fanned over his face when a soft, breathy moan escaped the other boy's lips. Before Sasuke could do anything else, however, Naruto pulled back slowly, running a hand through his hair. No, Sasuke. I can't abuse my ass anymore, it's so sore. Naruto whined softly, kissing Sasuke's jawbone. The Uchiha smirked down at Naruto, rolling his eyes before pulling his blonde into a loving embrace. It's okay, Naruto. I think I need to learn how to snuggle anyways. Naruto grinned up at him, his eyes twinkling happily as he squeezed Sasuke. I can teach you everything you need to know about snuggling. Smiling, Sasuke rested his head on Naruto's, watching the roses and breathed in the smell of the boy he loved. Freezing, Sasuke took in a deep breath as he considered what he had just thought. He loved Naruto Uzumaki. Pulling back, Sasuke leaned in and kissed Naruto once on the forehead before walking up to their TV, turning it on and looking back at the tanned boy. He was smiling like a dork, his face glowing. Wanna watch Forrest Gump? Sasuke offered, knowing Naruto loved that movie. Naruto's eyes brightened and he nodded quickly, joining Sasuke on his bed, so they could both watch the movie. Turning off the lights and pulling the pillows up around them so they could lean against the wall, Sasuke slid under the covers next to Naruto, pulling him close as the movie started playing. And in that moment, he knew he wanted this for the rest of his life. When the credits started rolling, Naruto turned his face towards Sasuke to nuzzle into the crook of his neck. Sasuke's body hummed and there was a strange kind of electric quality to the air that made him want to douse in water. Hey, Dobi, it's getting kind of late. Wanna go eat somewhere? Naruto shook his head, and with the action his cheek brushed Sasuke's exposed neck. The blonde's skin was wet. Sasuke pulled back with a frown, placing his hands on Naruto's shoulders so he could see his entire face. There were tears streaming down his soft cheeks, the skin around his eyes red and puffy. Why are you crying? Forrest Gump always makes me cry, Naruto breathed out, and his face crumbled as he began to cry again. Sasuke pulled him close to him, despite his slight annoyance, but he also felt a strange protectiveness wash over him. Leaning down, he kissed away the tears, wincing a little at how cliched it was. Either way, It made Naruto's tear flow come to a halt. "Uzumaki, you look adorable when you cry," Sasuke whispered as he smirked down at the blonde, who stiffened at those words. He turned his face up, glaring. Sasuke sucked in his breath forward and pressed his lips onto Naruto's tear-slicked ones. He heard the blonde gasp slightly, then kiss him back, the smooth texture of his mouth making Sasuke moan softly. Winding his hands through the feather-like locks, Sasuke pulled Naruto closer to him, crushing his lips powerfully to the others. Naruto mewed into his mouth, clawing at his back as he opened his mouth for Sasuke to ravish. Grinning against the Dobi's lips, Sasuke entered his hot cavern instantly, his tongue meeting Naruto's in an erotic dance as they twisted and slid over each other. Naruto pulled back, his eyes wide, his face even more flushed than before. Then his jean pockets lit up with an incoming text. Sasuke glared down at the device as Naruto fumbled around in his pocket for it, pulling it out with a successful hum. Sasuke watched as Naruto read the text and chuckled, the screen illuminating his features. His sky-blue orbs glanced up at Sasuke before showing him the screen. It was a text from Deidara. Stiffening, Sasuke took it from Naruto's hand, reading it over multiple times before he deemed it innocent and handed it back. Naruto was grinning his infuriating grin at Sasuke, wiggling his eyebrows up and down as he watched Sasuke's reaction. "Someone's jealous for no reason, Sasuke growled and leaned forward, pressing his forehead against Naruto's. "I am not jealous," he snarled into the blonde's grinning face, before roughly palming his jeans. The smile fell right off Naruto's face and his breath caught in his throat. Sasuke smirked and repeated the process until Naruto dropped his phone, tilting his head back with a moan. Sasuke, I can't take it F4, God. Naruto's fingers curled into Sasuke's midnight hair, pulling it roughly as Sasuke climbed higher on the blonde, positioning his hips directly above Naruto's. Staring down at the panting blonde, he thrust his clothed erection into Naruto's semi-hard one. The blonde exhaled with a puff of air and his eyes rolled back in his head. "We don't have to fuck, we can just play." The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next part.